The grand exhibition of exotic beasts was a spectacle like no other, held annually in the sprawling metropolis of Valtara, the capital of the Galactic Alliance. Species from every corner of the galaxy showcased their rarest and most dangerous creatures, drawing millions to witness the extraordinary. This year's highlight was the presence of King Thraxion of Zentari, who brought with him the most feared predator in the known universe, the Nightshade Wolf. The Nightshade Wolf, a towering beast of shimmering black fur and piercing silver eyes, was said to be untamable. Legends spoke of planets razed by its wrath and armies routed in terror. The creature's very presence was enough to send chills through the hearts of those who saw it. As it was paraded through the exhibition arena, even the bravest in the crowd averted their eyes, unable to meet its haunting gaze. 7-year-old Mia was not among those afraid. Small for her age, with a curious spirit and a penchant for wandering, she had slipped from her father's side to get a closer look at the exhibits. The cheers and roars of the crowd barely registered to her as she maneuvered through the towering legs of spectators. From his elevated throne above the arena, King Thraxion observed the proceedings with a regal air. Draped in the shimmering blue robes of Zentari royalty, his expression was one of pride. The Nightshade Wolf, restrained by magnetic bonds and surrounded by his elite guard, was a symbol of Zentari's strength and dominance. No creature alive could match its ferocity, or so he believed. As the beast growled and paced, testing the limits of its restraints, something unexpected happened. The magnetic bonds flickered, sparks flying as the field weakened. The audience gasped as the wolf's restraints shattered, freeing the ferocious predator. Pandemonium erupted. Spectators screamed and scrambled to escape as the wolf leapt into the crowd, its growls reverberating through the arena. King Thraxion's guards surged forward, but their weapons were no match for the creature's speed and raw power. The beast moved with deadly precision, scattering those who dared to approach. In the chaos, Mia found herself standing alone in the arena's lower level. She watched, wide-eyed, as the Nightshade Wolf turned its gaze toward her. The crowd froze, holding their breath as the massive predator stalked toward the small human girl. Eldrick, Mia's father, had been searching frantically for his daughter when he saw her standing in the path of the Nightshade Wolf. His heart stopped. "Mia!" he shouted, his voice drowned out by the panicked cries of the crowd. He tried to push through the throng, but the press of bodies made it impossible to reach her in time. The wolf moved closer, each step deliberate and menacing. Its silver eyes locked onto Mia, unblinking and filled with an intelligence that seemed almost unnatural. The air was thick with tension, the crowd silent now as they braced for the inevitable. Mia, however, stood still. She tilted her head slightly, her wide brown eyes meeting the wolf's gaze without a trace of fear. She held out her small hand, palm open, as though reaching for a stray dog rather than a galaxy-renowned predator. The wolf stopped abruptly, lowering its massive head to sniff her hand. A low growl rumbled in its throat, but it wasn't a sound of anger. It was something else entirely. Reverence, perhaps. Slowly, impossibly, the Nightshade Wolf sank to its knees, bowing its head before the tiny girl. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd. Even King Thraxion, known for his unshakable composure, rose from his seat, his expression one of disbelief. "This cannot be," he muttered. Mia stepped closer to the wolf, her hand brushing against its fur. The beast's eyes softened, and it let out a soft, almost purring sound. It was as though the ferocity had drained from its body, replaced by an inexplicable calm. The deadliest creature in the galaxy had submitted to a child. Eldrick finally broke free of the crowd and rushed to Mia's side. His breath came in ragged gasps as he pulled her into his arms. "Are you all right? What were you thinking?" "I wasn't scared," Mia said simply, her gaze still on the wolf. "He's not mean, he's just lonely." King Thraxion descended from his throne, his guards flanking him as he approached the scene. His piercing gaze swept over Mia, Eldrick, and the subdued wolf. "What sorcery is this?" he demanded, his voice echoing through the arena. "It's not sorcery," Mia replied, her voice small but confident. "He just wanted someone to be kind to him." Thraxion studied her for a long moment before turning his gaze to the wolf, now lying docile at her feet. The crowd, still stunned, watched in silence as the king spoke again. "This beast bows to no one, not even me, and yet it kneels before you. How?" Mia shrugged, her innocence unshaken. I don't know. He just likes me. Thraxian's eyes narrowed, his thoughts unreadable. Finally, he gestured to his guards. Bring the girl and her father to the palace. I will have answers. As the king's entourage escorted them away, Eldrick held Mia close, his mind racing with questions. The wolf followed without resistance, its massive frame towering over them, yet exuding a calmness that defied its fearsome reputation. Whatever had just happened, it was only the beginning. The journey to King Thraxian's palace was one of tension and wonder. Eldrick clutched Mia tightly as their transport ascended into the night sky, heading toward the shimmering spires of the Zentari stronghold. The nightshade wolf, still subdued, walked alongside the guards that flanked them, its movements fluid and unthreatening. To Eldrick, the sight of the massive predator, obeying the commands of a 7-year-old, was nothing short of miraculous. To the guards, it was unsettling. The palace loomed into view, its crystalline towers glowing faintly with an inner light that seemed alive. As they landed in the central courtyard, dozens of Zentari officials and courtiers gathered, their scaled forms glinting in the moonlight. Whispers filled the air as word of the wolf's submission spread like wildfire. This is impossible, one murmured. The beast kneels to no one, not even the king, another said, their voice tinged with awe. Thraxian disembarked first, his robes flowing like liquid metal as he descended the ramp. He turned to address the crowd, his voice sharp and commanding. Bring them to the Hall of Fates. Eldrick and Mia were ushered inside the grand hall, the wolf padding silently behind them. The room was vast, with high ceilings etched with ancient Zentari runes that seemed to shimmer and shift in the flickering light. At the center of the chamber stood a massive stone dais, where Thraxian ascended to take his place on the throne. The king's piercing gaze swept over the humans and the wolf. Speak, he commanded, his voice echoing. How did this come to be? Eldrick stepped forward, his voice shaking. Your Majesty, I don't know. My daughter wandered off during the exhibition, and before I could reach her, the wolf, it bowed to her. Thraxian's eyes narrowed as he studied Mia. She stood calmly, her small hand resting on the wolf's head, as though it were nothing more than a large dog. The beast's silver eyes followed her every movement, not with the predatory sharpness it had shown in the arena, but with something almost resembling loyalty. You expect me to believe that a child tamed the deadliest creature in the galaxy by accident? Thraxian said, his tone incredulous. There is more to this. The wolf is no ordinary beast. It is a creature of wrath, born of the ancient void wars. It was bred to destroy, not submit. Mia tilted her head, her voice soft but unwavering. He's not bad, he's just sad. The room fell silent. Even Thraxian seemed momentarily taken aback. Sad, he repeated, his voice softer now, though no less skeptical. Mia nodded. He's lonely. He doesn't want to fight. He just wants someone to care about him. Thraxian leaned back in his throne, his expression unreadable. And you claim to understand this creature's mind? I don't know how, Mia admitted, stroking the wolf's fur. I just feel it. Eldrick placed a protective hand on Mia's shoulder. Your Majesty, with all due respect, she's just a child. Whatever this connection is, it's not something she planned. Thraxian rose, his imposing figure casting a long shadow over them. Perhaps not, but the bond is undeniable. The nightshade wolf does not submit to force or fear. For centuries, it has served as a weapon of destruction, bound only by the strongest of Zentari warriors. Yet here it kneels, unchained, to a human child. His gaze shifted to one of the court scholars, a wizened Zentari elder, draped in ceremonial robes. Coralin, bring the Book of Shadows. The elder bowed and disappeared into an adjacent chamber, returning moments later with an ornate tome bound in blackened metal. She opened it to a specific page, her glowing eyes scanning the ancient script. There's a legend, Coralin began, her voice slow and deliberate, of a figure known as the Heart-Bonded. It is said that in times of great upheaval, a soul of pure innocence will emerge, capable of taming even the wildest of beasts. This bond is not forged by strength, but by compassion, a force the wolf cannot resist. The hall erupted in murmurs. Thraxian silenced them with a raised hand. Are you saying this child is the Heart-Bonded? Coralin inclined her head. The signs align, Your Majesty. The bond she shares with the nightshade wolf is unprecedented. It is not of our making. Thraxian's expression hardened. If this is true, then the child is far more significant than we realized. Such a bond could change the balance of power in the galaxy, for better or worse. Eldrick stepped forward, his voice firm despite his fear. She's just a little girl. She didn't ask for any of this. If you're thinking of using her, I will do no such thing. Thraxian interrupted sharply. But this bond is a matter of great importance. It cannot be ignored. The following day, Thraxian summoned Mia, Eldrick, and the wolf to the royal training grounds. The sprawling arena was surrounded by towering walls etched with glowing Zentari runes, designed to contain even the most ferocious of beasts. A crowd of courtiers, scholars, and soldiers gathered to witness what the king called a test of loyalty. If the bond between the child and the wolf is genuine, Thraxian announced, it will endure even under extreme conditions. Eldrick scowled. And what happens if it doesn't? Thraxian met his gaze. Then we will know the truth. Mia stood in the center of the arena, Shadow, the name she had given the wolf, beside her. The beast's ears twitched as it scanned the area, its muscles tense but its posture protective. Thraxian gave a signal, and a series of holographic adversaries materialized around them. These projections, though not real, were programmed to simulate combat and aggression, designed to provoke and intimidate. The holograms lunged toward Mia, their weapons gleaming. Shadow let out a deafening roar, positioning itself between her and the attackers. With lightning-fast reflexes, the wolf swiped through the projections, dispersing them into harmless bursts of light. Despite the simulated chaos, Mia remained calm, her hand resting lightly on Shadow's fur. The crowd murmured in awe. Even Thraxian's usually stoic expression betrayed a flicker of surprise. "Impressive," he muttered. But the test wasn't over. Thraxian gave another signal, and the projections shifted. This time, they took the form of Zentari soldiers, their holographic visages eerily lifelike. They approached with menacing precision, surrounding Mia and Shadow. "Shadow?" Mia whispered, her voice trembling for the first time. "It's okay. They're not real." The wolf growled low, its silver eyes darting between the projections and Mia. Then, to the astonishment of the onlookers, Shadow lowered its head and stood down, refusing to attack. The arena fell silent. Thraxian descended from his observation platform, his steps deliberate as he approached the pair. "The wolf obeys not out of fear but out of trust," he said, his voice tinged with admiration. "You have done what no Zentari warrior ever could. You have tamed its soul." Mia looked up at the king, her small frame dwarfed by his imposing figure. "I didn't tame him. I just showed him he wasn't alone." Thraxian studied her for a long moment before bowing his head slightly, a gesture of respect rarely given to anyone outside his own people. "You are remarkable, child. The galaxy has much to learn from you." As the crowd erupted into applause, Eldrick exhaled a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. Whatever this bond was, it had already begun to change, not only the wolf, but the hearts of everyone who witnessed it. The events of the arena spread across the Zentari Empire and beyond. News of the human child Mia and her bond with the Nightshade Wolf rippled through the galaxy, drawing the attention of curious scholars, wary political leaders, and opportunistic factions. In the Zentari royal palace, King Thraxian convened his advisors to discuss the implications. "The child is no ordinary human," one advisor declared, his scales glinting under the chamber's light. "If she can tame the wolf, what else could she control?" "She is not controlling it," Corellin, the elder scholar, corrected sharply. "The wolf follows her willingly. That bond is sacred, rooted in mutual trust and compassion, qualities we have underestimated in humans." Thraxian sat in silence, his gaze fixed on the holographic reports flooding his chamber. Images of Mia and Shadow in the arena played on a loop, the wolf's submission still a marvel to him. "Finally," he spoke, "the bond may be pure, but it also makes them a target. There are those who would exploit this connection, for power, for fear, or worse." "Your Majesty," another advisor interjected, "should we not take the wolf under Zentari protection? It was our creation during the Void Wars. Its power belongs to us." Thraxian's voice was cold. "No, the wolf belongs to no one, not even me, and neither does the child. We will protect them, but they will remain free." Meanwhile, Mia and Shadow had become inseparable. The wolf followed her everywhere, its massive frame moving with surprising grace through the palace halls. The Zentari guards, initially wary, grew accustomed to its presence, though they always kept their distance. Eldrick, however, remained on edge. One evening, Eldrick found Mia in the royal gardens, sitting beneath a towering crystal tree. Shadow lay beside her, its head resting on her lap as she absent-mindedly stroked its fur. "Mia," Eldrick said, kneeling beside her, "I know you care about Shadow, but this is bigger than you realize. People, dangerous people, are going to want him. They'll want you too." Mia looked up at her father, her eyes calm but determined. "I'm not scared, Dad. Shadow will protect me." "And who will protect Shadow?" Eldrick countered. "You're just a little girl." Shadow let out a low, rumbling growl, not of threat, but of reassurance. It raised its head, looking directly at Eldrick with an intelligence that made his breath catch. Mia smiled faintly. "Shadow says we'll protect each other." Eldrick sighed, running a hand through his hair. He wanted to argue, to take her away from all this, but the bond between Mia and the wolf was undeniable. "Just promise me you'll be careful," he said finally. "I promise," Mia said, leaning against Shadow. "We'll be okay." Mia's promise was soon tested. Late one night, alarms blared throughout the palace. Eldrick jolted awake, grabbing the plasma pistol he'd been given for protection. Moments later, Zentari guards stormed into their quarters. "Human Eldrick," one said urgently, "you and the child must come with us. The palace is under attack." "Attack?" Eldrick demanded, pulling Mia from her bed. "By who?" "Unknown forces," the guard replied. "They breached the outer defenses minutes ago. Their targets are clear. They want the wolf." Shadow, already alert, growled deeply as it positioned itself in front of Mia. The guards hesitated, their weapons drawn but not aimed. "Let's move," Eldrick snapped, lifting Mia into his arms. Shadow followed closely, its silver eyes scanning every shadow for threats. The halls of the palace were chaos. Explosions rocked the walls, and the once pristine corridors were littered with debris. As they made their way to the secure chamber, they encountered the attackers. Mercenaries clad in black armor, their weapons gleaming with stolen Zentari technology. One mercenary raised his rifle, aiming at Shadow. Before Eldrick could react, the wolf sprang forward, its claws flashing like blades. The attacker crumpled instantly, his weapon clattering to the floor. Eldrick fired at another mercenary, his aim sharp and practiced. "Keep moving," he shouted to the guards. "Don't let them separate us." Mia clung to his shoulder, her eyes wide but dry. "Shadow," she called as the wolf leapt toward another group of attackers. "Be careful." The wolf tore through the enemy ranks with terrifying efficiency, its movements a blur of speed and power. Yet, even in the heat of battle, it never strayed far from Mia, ensuring her safety above all else. In the secure chamber, King Thraxion stood at the center of a tactical display, directing his forces. He turned sharply as Mia, Eldrick, and Shadow entered, the latter covered in scorch marks but uninjured. "You made it," Thraxion said, his tone a mix of relief and frustration. "They came for the wolf, as I feared." "Who are they?" Eldrick demanded, lowering Mia to the ground. "And how did they get past your defenses?" Thraxion's expression darkened. "A rogue faction, likely mercenaries hired by one of my rivals. The wolf's bond with the child has made it the most sought-after asset in the galaxy." Shadow growled low, its silver eyes locked on the tactical display. The image showed enemy ships circling the palace, their weapons firing relentlessly at the Zentari defenses. The palace shields flickered under the assault, their collapse imminent. "They won't stop," Thraxion said grimly. "Not until they have what they came for." "Then we fight," Eldrick said, his voice steely. "But not just for the wolf, for my daughter." Thraxion nodded, impressed by the human's resolve. "Very well, we will hold the line. But know this, if the wolf's power falls into the wrong hands, it could mean war on a galactic scale." As the chamber shook with another explosion, Mia knelt beside Shadow, placing her hands gently on its fur. "We'll protect each other," she whispered. Shadow let out a soft rumble, its glowing eyes meeting hers with unwavering trust. Together, they prepared to face the battle ahead, their bond stronger than ever. The palace trembled under the relentless barrage of enemy fire. Outside, the skies of Zentari Prime burned with the energy of starships exchanging volleys of plasma. The attackers, a well-organized band of mercenaries led by the enigmatic rogue General Krivax, had pierced the outer defenses and were closing in on the palace. Their mission was clear: capture the Nightshade Wolf at any cost. Inside the palace, Mia and Shadow stood at the heart of the unfolding chaos. Eldrick, his plasma pistol clutched tightly, kept a wary eye on the blast doors that separated them from the main hall. King Thraxian, now clad in ceremonial armor that shimmered like liquid steel, barked commands to his Zentari warriors through a holographic tactical display. "They're focusing all firepower on the western walls," Thraxian said, pointing to a weak point on the map. "They're trying to create a breach. If they get through, they'll flood the palace." Eldrick tightened his grip on his weapon. "What are our chances of holding them off?" "Not good," Thraxian admitted grimly. "Their technology is advanced, likely stolen from Zentari outposts, and they outnumber us 3-1. Mia, standing beside Shadow, looked up at the king. "What can we do?" Thraxian hesitated, his piercing eyes softening as they met Mia's determined gaze. "You've already done more than enough, child. The wolf will protect you. Just stay here." But Mia shook her head. "Shadow isn't just protecting me. We protect each other. If they want him, they'll have to get through me first." Thraxian raised an eyebrow, impressed by the young human's courage. A bold claim. Let's hope it doesn't come to that. As the attackers breached the western wall, the first wave of mercenaries poured into the palace grounds. Zentari warriors engaged them with disciplined precision, their energy blades cutting through the darkness. Shadow growled deeply, its silver eyes glowing as it prepared to fight. Mia placed a hand on its fur. "Be careful, Shadow," she whispered. The beast responded with a low, reassuring rumble before bounding forward. Its massive frame blurred as it moved with predatory grace, leaping into the fray. The mercenaries, confident in their armor and advanced weaponry, were unprepared for the sheer ferocity of the Nightshade wolf. Shadow tore through their ranks with calculated precision, its claws slicing through metal as though it were paper. Eldrick and Thraxian joined the fight from a balcony overlooking the main hall. Thraxian's energy blade shimmered as he cut down an approaching mercenary, while Eldrick provided cover fire with his pistol. The two fought side by side, an unlikely alliance forged in the heat of battle. "I didn't think I'd ever be fighting alongside royalty," Eldrick muttered, firing a precise shot that disarmed a mercenary below. "And I didn't think a human mechanic would be defending my throne," Thraxian retorted, slashing through another attacker. "Yet here we are." Despite their efforts, the mercenaries continued to advance. Shadow's relentless assaults slowed them, but it was clear they were prepared to sacrifice as many lives as necessary to reach their goal. The air was thick with the sounds of battle. Blaster fire, energy blades clashing, and the deafening roars of the Nightshade wolf. "Mia, stay close," Eldrick shouted as the enemy pushed closer to their position. But Mia was already moving. She climbed onto a balcony railing, her small frame silhouetted against the chaos below. "Shadow," she called, her voice carrying through the din. The wolf paused, its glowing eyes snapping to her. "Come back," she commanded, her firm yet gentle. Shadow obeyed instantly, leaping up to the balcony in a single bound. The mercenaries faltered at the sight, their fear palpable. The beast stood protectively in front of Mia, its growl echoing through the hall like thunder. Thraxian turned to her, astonishment in his eyes. "How do you do that?" "I don't know," Mia admitted. "He just listens to me." Thraxian glanced at Eldrick, then back at Mia. "Then let's make sure he has the chance to keep listening." As the battle raged on, the Zentari defenses began to falter. Krivax himself entered the palace, flanked by heavily armed mercenaries clad in exosuits. The rogue general was a towering figure, his dark armor etched with scars from countless battles. His voice boomed through the halls as he issued his ultimatum. "King Thraxian," Krivax roared, "surrender the wolf and I'll spare your people." Thraxian stepped forward, his blade glowing with energy. "You'll find Zentari are not so easily intimidated," Krivax laughed, a harsh, metallic sound. "You're a fool to resist. That wolf is a weapon, a tool of power. It doesn't belong to you. It doesn't belong to anyone." Mia's voice rang out, clear and defiant. "You're wrong. He's not a weapon. He's my friend." The rogue general turned, his dark eyes narrowing as he saw the girl and the wolf. "You must be the child I've heard so much about. Tell me, little one, what makes you think you can stand in my way?" Before Mia could respond, Shadow roared, its scales glowing with a brilliance that filled the hall. The mercenaries stepped back, their confidence shaken. "She doesn't have to stand in your way," Eldrick said, leveling his pistol. "She's got him." Krivax sneered. Let's see how long that lasts. He raised his hand, signaling his forces to attack. The mercenaries surged forward, but Shadow met them head-on. The wolf's movements were impossibly fast, its claws and teeth tearing through the enemy ranks. The air crackled with energy as Shadow unleashed a pulse of light that sent several mercenaries flying. Thraxion and Eldrick joined the fight, their attacks coordinated with Shadow's feral precision. Mia stayed back, her heart pounding as she watched her father and the king fight alongside her companion. Despite their bravery, it was clear the enemy had the upper hand. Krivax's forces were too numerous and their technology too advanced. Just as hope began to waver, Shadow stopped abruptly, its silver eyes locking onto Mia. The wolf let out a low, resonant growl, and suddenly Mia understood. "It's time," she said softly. "Time for what?" Eldrick shouted, reloading his pistol. Mia stepped forward, her small frame dwarfed by the chaos around her. She placed both hands on Shadow's glowing fur and closed her eyes. The wolf emitted a low hum, and the air around them seemed to shift. A wave of energy radiated outward, freezing the mercenaries in their tracks. Krivax staggered back, his armor sparking. "What is this?" Mia opened her eyes, and they shone with the same silver light as Shadow's. "He's not just a weapon, he's hope." The wave of energy grew stronger, forcing the mercenaries to retreat. Krivax snarled in frustration, his forces crumbling before the combined power of the child and the wolf. "We'll meet again," he spat before retreating with his remaining soldiers. As silence fell over the palace, Thraxion sheathed his blade and turned to Mia and Shadow. "You've done the impossible," he said, his voice filled with awe. "Not just today, but from the moment you tamed that beast." Eldrick pulled Mia into a tight hug, his relief palpable. "You were amazing," he whispered. Mia looked up at Shadow, her hand resting on its fur. "We were amazing." Thraxion stepped closer, his expression solemn. "The galaxy will remember this day, not as a victory of strength, but as a triumph of trust and courage. You and Shadow have proven that even the fiercest of creatures can find peace, and that even the smallest among us can change the stars." The dawn that followed the siege was unlike any the Zentari Palace had seen in decades. The once pristine halls bore the scars of battle, with shattered pillars, scorched walls, and the lingering smell of burnt metal. Yet, amidst the destruction, there was an undeniable sense of triumph. The mercenaries had retreated, their forces broken, and Krivax had fled into the shadows of the galaxy. For now, Zentari Prime was safe. Mia sat quietly in the royal gardens, her legs dangling over the edge of a crystal fountain. Shadow lay beside her, its massive frame curled protectively around her. Despite its size and ferocity during the battle, the wolf's presence was calm, even comforting, as though it sensed Mia's need for peace. Eldrick approached slowly, carrying 2 mugs of hot tea. His movements were stiff, battle wounds and fatigue had taken their toll, but his expression softened as he watched his daughter stroke the fur of the galaxy's deadliest predator. "You've been quiet," he said, handing her a mug before sitting down next to her. Mia stared into the tea, her fingers tracing the rim of the mug. "Everyone keeps saying we won, but it doesn't feel like it." Eldrick sighed, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Because you're thinking about the people we lost." She nodded. "The Zentari guards, even some of the mercenaries. They didn't have to fight. They didn't have to die." "You're right," Eldrick said softly. "But you saved so many more lives, Mia. Without you and Shadow, we would have lost everything. And that's something worth remembering." Shadow let out a low, rumbling hum, nudging Mia gently with its massive head. She managed a small smile, leaning into the wolf's warmth. Just then, King Thraxion arrived, his regal armor polished and his posture as commanding as ever. Yet there was an uncharacteristic gentleness in his gaze as he looked at Mia. "The people of Zentari owe you their lives," he said, his voice steady. "You and Shadow turned the tide of a battle that could have destroyed us." Mia looked up at him, her expression solemn. "It wasn't just us. Everyone fought to protect this place." Thraxion smiled faintly. "Spoken like a true leader." Eldrick frowned slightly, sensing the weight behind the king's words. "What happens now, Your Majesty? Krivax may have retreated, but he won't stop. He'll come back, and others will follow." Thraxion's gaze darkened. "You're right. The bond between your daughter and the wolf has become a symbol, one that will draw both allies and enemies. That's why we must decide what comes next." Later that day, Thraxian convened a council meeting in the Hall of Fates. Zentari officials, military leaders, and scholars gathered to discuss the implications of the bond between Mia and Shadow. Eldrick stood at his daughter's side, his protective instincts on high alert, while Mia sat quietly with Shadow resting at her feet. "The wolf cannot remain here," one general declared, his scaled hand slamming on the table. "As long as it's on Zentari Prime, we'll be a target. Our defenses won't hold against another attack of this scale. But the wolf and the girl are our greatest strength," Corellin countered, her voice calm but firm. "Their bond represents something far greater than mere power. It is a beacon of unity, of trust. To send them away would be a mistake." Thraxian raised a hand, silencing the murmurs that rippled through the chamber. "Eldrick, Mia, you've been at the center of this storm. What would you choose?" Eldrick glanced at Mia, who met his gaze with a quiet confidence that belied her age. He turned back to the king. "I want my daughter to be safe, but I also know she's already made her choice." Mia stood, her small frame dwarfed by the towering Zentari around her. "Shadow and I belong together. And if we can help protect people, if we can stop what happened here from happening to anyone else, then that's what we'll do." The room fell silent as her words sank in. Even the staunchest skeptics couldn't deny the clarity in her voice. Thraxian rose from his throne, his expression thoughtful. "The galaxy will remember what you've done here today, Mia Holt, and it will look to you and Shadow as symbols of hope." He gestured toward the holographic map of the galaxy projected in the center of the chamber. "But the galaxy is vast, and its dangers are many. If you are to carry this burden, you'll need a sanctuary, a place where you can learn and grow without constant threats." Corellin stepped forward. "There is an ancient Zentari outpost deep in the Orion Nebula. It is hidden, protected by natural energy fields, and known only to a few. It would provide the safety you need, while also allowing the wolf's bond with Mia to strengthen." Eldrick's jaw tightened. "You're asking us to leave everything behind." Thraxian met his gaze. "I'm asking you to safeguard something precious. Your daughter's bond with the wolf has the power to change the galaxy, for better or worse. But to protect her and to protect what she represents, sacrifices must be made." Mia looked up at her father, her hand resting on Shadow's head. "We'll be okay, Dad. Shadow will keep us safe, and we'll come back someday." Eldrick knelt in front of her, his hands on her shoulders. "If this is what you want, then I'll be with you every step of the way." That evening, under the soft glow of Zentari Prime's twin moons, Mia, Eldrick, and Shadow boarded a sleek, newly outfitted ship gifted by Thraxian. The king stood at the docking bay, his regal demeanor softened by a rare smile. "Go with the blessings of Zentari," he said, "and know that you will always have a home here." Mia hugged Shadow tightly as the ship lifted off, her eyes fixed on the horizon. As they soared into the stars, the wolf let out a deep, resonant howl, a sound that carried across the galaxy, echoing through the hearts of all who heard it. For Mia, Eldrick, and Shadow, this was not an ending, but the beginning of a new journey. One that would test their bond, challenge their courage, and redefine the very fabric of the galaxy. Together, they would face whatever lay ahead, united by a connection that transcended fear, power, and even the stars themselves.